Imperfect Rewrite, A Thought Experiment on History, Memory, and the Limits of Knowledge by Charles M. Cook. Disclaimer. This is a philosophical thought experiment. It does not claim that history has been rewritten, nor does it propose a definitive cause for the Mandela effect. Its purpose is to explore the limits of human knowledge in a scenario where the historical record itself is perfectly altered. 1. The premise: what if history could be rewritten? Imagine an organization with the ability to rewrite history, not by altering reality, but by systematically replacing every surviving record of a past event, every photograph, every newspaper, every government document, every video, every physical artifact. Everything capable of verifying what originally happened is either destroyed or replaced with a new version. Now ask a simple question. If this process were completely successful, how would anyone ever know it had happened? 2. The problem: evidence defines history. Human beings reconstruct history from surviving evidence. If all original evidence disappears and is replaced with a consistent new record, future generations will naturally accept the replacement as genuine history. The original event becomes inaccessible. One possible exception remains: human memory. Suppose some people remember the event differently, but memory is widely recognized as unreliable. It is reconstructive, malleable, and vulnerable to suggestion. Courts routinely reject memory as standalone evidence because it can be sincerely wrong. This creates an unusual situation. The entire historical record points in one direction. The only contradiction comes from memories that cannot independently prove themselves. 3. The knowledge problem: perfect rewrites are undetectable. Consider two possibilities. Scenario A: history was never rewritten. Scenario B: history was rewritten perfectly. From the perspective of someone living afterward, both scenarios produce exactly the same observable evidence. The historical record agrees with itself. No objective evidence of the original survives. Conflicting memories are dismissed as ordinary memory errors. There is no observation that can distinguish one scenario from the other. A perfectly successful rewrite of history is indistinguishable from history that was never rewritten. Therefore, no amount of evidence available after the rewrite can determine which is true. This leads to a coherent epistemological conclusion. The person who believes history was rewritten cannot prove it. The person who believes history was never rewritten cannot prove that either. Both positions fit the same evidence if the rewrite is assumed to have been perfect. This symmetry is what makes the thought experiment philosophically interesting. It identifies a scenario where the truth, whatever it is, becomes fundamentally unknowable from the available evidence. 4. Imperfect rewrites, the residual problem. Now suppose the rewrite is almost, but not completely successful. A few original artifacts survive: an old product label, a forgotten photograph, an overlooked newspaper, an archived document. These remnants would be isolated, difficult to verify, inconsistent, easy to dismiss as mistakes, reproductions, hoaxes, or misunderstandings. The logic of the thought experiment predicts a perfect rewrite leaves no trace whatsoever. An almost perfect rewrite leaves only tiny remnants, isolated artifacts, or conflicting memories. Because those remnants are rare and ambiguous, they are easy to explain away as mistakes, hoaxes, faulty memory, or anomalies. As a result, the rewrite still succeeds in practice because the surviving evidence isn't considered persuasive. 5. Residual evidence and the limits of confirmation. In real-world cases, when someone points to a residual artifact, there are always multiple competing explanations. Manufacturing variation misprints, hoaxes, faulty memory, incomplete records, misidentified objects. Because these ordinary explanations are always available, no residual artifact can ever serve as decisive proof that a rewrite occurred. The model predicts this outcome. Strong evidence gets removed. Weak evidence survives. Weak evidence is always open to ordinary explanations. This means the model is structured so that the only surviving evidence is evidence that can never conclusively establish the model. Philosophically, this is what makes the thought experiment interesting. It describes a scenario where the rewrite, if it occurred, would be undetectable in principle, not just in practice. 6. Memory as non-admissible evidence. Courts routinely reject memory as standalone evidence because it is reconstructive, malleable, and easily influenced. This real-world principle becomes crucial in the thought experiment. If a rewrite removes all physical evidence and memory is automatically dismissed as unreliable, then the original history becomes impossible to establish. The very rule that protects courts from false memories also ensures that a perfect rewrite cannot be detected. This does not imply that conflicting memories are accurate. It simply shows that, under the assumptions of the thought experiment, memory cannot rescue the original history once the physical record has been replaced. 7. Connection to the Mandela effect. This thought experiment raises an interesting question. If a perfect, or nearly perfect, historical rewrite were possible, what would people experience afterward? One possibility is that some individuals would sincerely remember events differently than the historical record. To everyone else, those memories would resemble what is commonly called the Mandela effect. This thought experiment does not claim that the Mandela effect is caused by rewritten history. Instead, it asks, would a perfectly successful historical rewrite be indistinguishable from the Mandela effect to later observers? 8. The two-version pattern, Mandela effect, reports almost always divide into two versions. What people remember, what the current record shows, they do not splinter into many inconsistent variants. This two-version structure aligns with the dynamics predicted by the thought experiment. A rewrite would produce exactly two states. The original version, preserved only in memory, the rewritten version, preserved in the record. This pattern does not prove that a rewrite occurred, but it strengthens the rewrite hypothesis relative to explanations based on random memory error, which would be expected to produce many inconsistent variants rather than two stable attractors. 9. Philosophical questions raised by the thought experiment. These questions deepen the epistemic implications. What counts as evidence when evidence can be erased? Can truth exist without evidence? Is memory ever admissible when all physical evidence is gone? How do we detect perfect deception? Is the Mandela effect indistinguishable from a rewrite? And the open questions that should be left for readers. Is an undetectable rewrite meaningful? Does unknowability limit human knowledge? Can history be trusted if evidence can be erased? 10. The central question. The purpose of this thought experiment is not to prove that history has been rewritten. It is to ask whether a perfectly successful rewrite could ever be detected. If every piece of evidence supporting the original history were removed or replaced, and memory alone were considered insufficient proof, then the original history, and even the fact that it had been rewritten, would become unknowable. 11. Final thought. This leads to a single philosophical question. If a perfect rewrite of history leaves no evidence that it ever occurred, is there any way to know the difference between rewritten history and original history? If the answer is no, then the success of the rewrite does more than change history. It changes what humanity is capable of knowing about its own past.